Oh man, I was not sure if I was going to be able to stream, but lots of good news in general. So we'll get through some of that. The topic will be really short, but that should be obvious. But I want to give some updates. So last Friday, my wife had surgery. The really good news is that she's doing phenomenally well. Surgery went smooth and easy. She's recovering pretty well. I mean, she still has like super limited use of her hands. That's going to be like that for a little while, but um, no negative side effects so far. And even in talking very briefly with the nurse who helped, so like often when people get carpal tunnel surgery, right? Because there's a ligament that sits here on your palm, and for a lot of people, that ligament is effectively speaking too thick or too large, and it applies pressure to the carpal tunnel, which is like, think of it like a bundle of wires coming through this little hole in your wrist, right? All the nerves and stuff that control your hand and fingers. Um, it's applying pressure, which causes all the different problems. But heck is this stupid thing? The weirdest stuff gets like popped up on YouTube nowadays when you're streaming. I don't know what it is. Anyway, um, so they basically cut that ligament to relieve the pressure. And what often happens is a lot of people will their fingers will be numb for quite a while. And it's just a result of what happens with the surgery and as you're healing and all those kind of things. So my wife at first, like 2 days in, was like, "Hey, all my fingertips are really numb. I hope this is normal." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, based on what they did, yes, it probably is pretty normal, but I'll call and ask, you know." And so we called today to get a few updates because there was the wraps that were on her hand could finally come off today for the first time to let her skin kind of breathe, get some air, and dry, which is an important part of the healing process. And I just talked about it, and the nurse was like, "Well, are they completely numb and she can't feel anything?" I was like, "No. They're just a light tingle. She's starting to get feeling back in her fingertips." She's like, "That's good." And most people, it usually takes a couple of weeks before the numbness starts to go away. And for some people, it can be even longer. So really good news there, right? In that it seems like the surgery is taking the steps we need to be very, very positive. And my wife would get this kind of like burning sensation kind of along this line right here, right? And she hasn't had that since the surgery. Now, granted, she has also not been doing a lot because she can't. And she's been on um, a pretty powerful pain medication, so that's helping. But overall, doing really well. What else? What else is we're talking about before I really quickly do our topic, and then we can do like full normal question and answers. Oh, I got results back from one of my two doctors about my that potential like leg surgery I would have to do, and the short answer is probably should do it. And so I won't go too deep, but basically, like in your legs, you have what they refer to as deep veins, which is that's the stuff that's in like your muscles and bones and all the connective tissue, right? That's what supplies the blood or moves the blood out, more importantly. Not arteries are supplying blood, veins are taking it back up out of that tissue, right? And then you have what they refer to as surface veins. And the surface veins are not necessarily visible from the surface, but they're up above all the muscles and stuff. And um, those are the ones where, like, if you were to ever get a varicose vein, as an example, old people and some of us large folks, we deal with those things. Those are in the surface veins. CJ, is it venous insufficiency? Yeah, so I got diagnosed with a venous insufficiency years ago, and I wear compression in my legs because of that. So for those who've never, if you're not familiar with compression socks, basically they're a special type of fabric that adds a little bit of squeeze, and that pressure, that compression helps your veins function correctly. Well, usually what happens in venous insufficiency is that the valves that sit in your veins that they open, let some blood through, then close, open, close, open, close. They basically go faulty, and they don't let enough fluid up and out of your lower legs. So what they usually see, sorry, we're using the royal we, I suppose, is that you will get excess blood pooling usually around your ankles, and it causes swelling. This is really, really common, especially in people who are bigger, right? But also in the elderly. My doctor, who is like rail thin, she's a very, very petite gal. She actually deals with it, so she wears compression. But when you're of certain sizes, compression might not be enough. So basically, they do this thing that they call a vein collapse. And this sounds horrible. The other name is a vein ablation, which basically means the same thing. And way back in the day, what they would do is they would, in your ankle, I'm going to use my wrist, right? But they would put a hole in your ankle, and they would shove this really thin metal rod and run it all the way up inside the vein, and then hook at the top up near your hip and rip it out. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? They don't do that anymore. Good news. That what they did for a long time, mostly in like the, I think, 80s, 90s, and early thousands, is they would go through and do a series of little pokes and basically inject an acid that would burn and scar the vein tissue so that fluid could no longer travel in there. And that would help prevent the fluid pooling. Well, they have a newer version of this where instead they do a single poke down at the bottom of your ankle again, and they basically fill it with a medical glue, and they wait for the glue to dry, and then it kind of like, think of it like crystallizing your vein almost, where that you've just got this glue that goes solid inside your vein and prevents the surface veins from carrying the amount of blood that they used to. But they only do this when they're already kind of defective, and they're not doing it to the deep veins that are the ones that are doing the actual important work of moving the blood you need through your system. So, yeah, basically they have suggested this procedure to me, potentially on both of my legs, but they'll start on one. But I'm also not in a condition where it's urgent. That was the good news. There's no like clots or anything really scary. Just that it's probably something that's worth considering while I'm also trying to like work on losing weight, right? Stuff like that. The usual doctor thing, if you're a big guy, is, hey, have you considered losing weight? Like, yeah, I'm trying, man. Jeez. I'm trying. It's not easy. Stress is a thing. So yeah, that's all the fun stuff. But that probably won't happen for like probably several months. And the good news is apparently the recovery time on that is only like a day. They basically do it the doctor was saying, we do the procedure on a Wednesday, and then we suggest that you take the Thursday off, and usually most people go back to work Friday, or sometimes they'll take the whole time off and wait till Monday just to take it easy. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice to know. It's not a whole lot. Yeah. Fishcapade. Sometimes I'm just like, don't explain it to me, Dr. Person. Just go make with the fixing. The 186 element, not urgent equals second opinion. So I have talked to like 2 different doctors so far. My general doctor, who was just like, hey, we should go see a vascular specialist, let them look at some imaging and see what they have to say. My own doctor looked at the same imaging and explained kind of like what she is seeing and what she understands, but vascular specialists definitely are more familiar. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't need to do it right now. It's not like if you don't do this, you're gonna die kind of thing, right? It's hey, you should do this because long term, it can prevent a bigger issue, which is nice. Nice. But something it can probably wait a few months, if not like 6, right? It's not something I have to do like, in theory, if I do it by the end of the year, that would be really good, but not dire if I chose not to. It's just a better way to manage some of the things that are going on. It might make it easier with some of the things that go on in my legs to then be able to do things like walk more and do more other stuff that helps shed extra weight. Fun stuff like that. So, topic, because this will be very fast. I know we took way too long on that. Saturday, I put out a video, and I think Thursday or Friday, Alex from Fishery put out a video talking about this, but basically eBay was banning or had announced that within 30 days they were going to ban the sale of live animals on their platform with some tiny exceptions. And those tiny exceptions were basically only feeder insects. And they had a list of examples, but not a comprehensive list of all of the things that were allowed. So there was some interesting stuff where, based on what we had seen, and Alex had actually contacted the eBay customer support and got some extra clarification that, like, one of the few things that you could do in the fish related world is brine shrimp and eggs of fish that would actually take long enough to gestate to where shipping them is reasonable. So rainbow fish eggs, killifish eggs, most of the rice fish eggs. I know some of them are a little different, but like Madaka's is a great example, right? But other than that, it was like no fish, no reptiles, nothing else in the live animal space. And yeah, there was this like really Luis, you bring up shrimp. There was this really weird kind of not direct answer about whether or not shrimp were okay to keep selling, because apparently there were a couple of larger shrimp people that were trying to figure that out. And yeah, within a week, apparently, there was enough of a ruckus because they put out emails first to a lot of these sellers, and there were many sellers that had sold significant amounts. I mean, there were sellers that were basically like online fish stores that sell a significant amount of stuff. I got a lot of comments from some of the folks who watched, who explained, like, I've bought, hundreds of fish off of eBay, and I've always had success, and I've loved everything. I'm apparently the outlier where, like, the one time I ever bought fish on eBay, it went horribly bad. But that seller also was like a random dude and not like a more dedicated fish seller on eBay. So basically, a new email came out. I think it was yesterday. I think it was Monday, but it might have been early Tuesday morning. I can't remember the direct timeline, but basically, eBay said a lot of people are not very happy about this. So yeah, never mind. We're gonna not ban live animal sales. We're sorry, and we appreciate your feedback. Please keep selling things with us so we can keep making money off of you. Oh man. Johnny at Dance Fish. Not sure how something better hasn't replaced eBay in 2025. We used it briefly, and I don't think they've updated anything since 2003. Their fees are high as hell, too. So I think part of it is, like, you can sell live animals on Amazon and Walmart online. And I specifically chose not to mention these, and let me explain why. This is one of the things I did want to talk about. Amazon and Walmart already kind of are horrible when it comes to the amount of fees that they charge you. And while eBay does charge a chunk in fees, it is less than Amazon or Walmart. And to top it off, some of the things that Amazon and Walmart do, Amazon is the bigger offender here, but Walmart is a big offender too, is that they do a lot of really horrible things to screw over small businesses. It would be much harder for them to try and compete in, like, fish, because they're not going to try and make their own off-brand fish breeding facility, right? That's not going to happen. But there's a lot of things that are brutal in the sense of the world of Amazon trying to find in some level of discovery, because they're, as Johnny is saying, they're constantly changing things, and that makes it really tough for like small businesses that do a really niche hobby to actually have a chance of making a reasonable amount of money, especially given the high fees and costs and their shipping requirements. Now, granted, most of us who have ever shipped fish know that we basically always do it overnight, which is part of why one of the hard parts about being a fish seller is shipping costs, because overnight freight is not cheap, right? But I think a lot of us understand that if we want to get certain level of unique or premium items, that's just a necessity, right? It's just something that has to be done. Yeah, but yeah. So the good news, for those who sold on eBay or for those who use eBay as a customer, you're good. eBay has backtracked. They heard the cries of the people. It's probably realistically that they heard the cries of their wallet going like, wait a minute, this is more people than we thought. Like somebody looked at this really quickly. Now I would guess long term they will make some alterations to where within their terms of service they will require sellers and buyers to pay attention to things like if it's on the CITES list or if it's considered an invasive species where you live, to kind of remove themselves from any potential legal liability. Because one of the things that eBay certainly doesn't want is the risk of a state going after and fining and or suing eBay because of sales of CITES, species fish, or other animals, or even worse, like, well, CITES might be worse, but worse in the case of individual states, invasive species, because there are many states who have a pretty lengthy list of invasive species. California is a great example, right? California is pretty restrictive because of their water conditions and how many things can potentially be a problem in their native water systems. So yeah, the good news, eBay's back. Or never went is not going to go away. Maybe that's more accurate. The ban is not going to be put in place. You're A-okay. But yeah, reticulated pythons, those are kind of a problem almost everywhere because people get really dumb with snakes. It's really unfortunate because snakes can actually be very cool pets. Um, I mean, it takes a certain type of person. Not everybody is into the like giant scaly thing, but I don't know. I've had snakes as pets in the past, and I think they're fun. All right, let's get into some questions. So if you have a question, feel free. At Bentley Pascal makes it super easy for me to see them. But yeah, Mortal Living board of directors did not appreciate Prospector losing millions of dollars, so they reversed it. They saw the people say, okay, we will just buy it from blah, 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 blah. And that scared them. I mean, I would be curious if they drilled down in their data and went like, hey, thanks for all this feedback. Here's a follow-up. This is the rough number of sales of animals that would have been banned from our platform. Especially if they would have gone forward and said something, whether it's a fake, and let's be honest, anytime a corporation says they're in favor of a certain social movement of any form, it's purely to drive profit. That's where it's becoming super obvious if you care, and I'm not trying to be political, but just if you really cared about, say, like diversity movements, and all of a sudden, like every company, every big corporation in tech especially is like dropping all their diversity stuff, right? Because they perceive a shift in the political climate that is no longer the profitable thing to do. So they're changing their tone because what they actually care about is money and nothing else. I want to be very clear. I'm not trying to be political about anything, just more like it would be interesting if eBay was willing to give you that level of clarity to be like, hey, originally our plan was to do this because of X. However, we've looked at data and we've definitely heard from you. And so we wanted to be transparent about that data so that you understand how strong your voice is, right? And that's probably like not the way that corporate would ever message anything, but I think from a perspective of trying to build trust back, because one of the things that happens is whenever a company makes an action, whether they enact it or not, but something that causes an amount, we'll say, we don't know what percentage like animal sales makes of eBay's overall revenue streams, but whenever a percentage of people scream at you and are pissed at you, even saying, oh, we're sorry, it was just a joke, or like, oops, clearly we misunderstood how many of you there were, we're going to just not do that thing. It still breaks a certain amount of trust because there's always an inherent and quiet worry in the back of those people's mind, right? That base, that niche of customers, that they might try to enact this later. So one of the things that like corporations can do if they had the stones to do it. Let's be honest, because it's kind of a gutsy thing to do, is be so transparent that you give people that information willingly, to say like, hey, no, we heard your feedback, and here's what your voice represents, and we made this change because of this, right? It's kind of like it's saying the quiet part out loud, and sometimes that's appreciated by people. But yeah, it's interesting. There's one other thing I wanted to get to. It's a shame that Vivi went down. I thought they had a lot of potential. Then boom, website down and no communication with their users. So disappointing. Well, Marina, I think the biggest reason why Vivi went down is they had a completely unsustainable shipping model. They were allowing the fish keepers on their market to ship for such an atrociously cheap amount of money that they had to be losing money on every transaction, and a reasonable amount of money on every transaction. So much so that I don't think, especially as we've watched the price of shipping over the last few years, since the pandemic forward, I don't think that was ever going to get to a level of where they could have made it profitable enough without taking such a large fee from all the small fish breeders who had participated in that website, that it would then be no longer worth it for them, because they would just be making so little. It would be cheaper probably to work with someone like, say, Dan's Fish and sell at a wholesale level instead, or even local wholesalers, local stores. Depending on the scale in which they're breeding would probably depend on which of those avenues they would take. And similarly, like, Get Gills went down because it just wasn't sustainable, unfortunately. And I'm sure if I like talk to Dan, we could get way better information about that. But it's just, with the cost of shipping and the cost of sustaining a website like that, you have to have a certain level of traffic, plain and simple, and you have to have a certain number of sales. And if we're not getting enough, it becomes unsustainable and just costs too much. Johnny from Dan says, I'm interested to see if Morph Market follows through updating their aquatic section. I have a feeling they will, because I think there's going to be enough sellers on eBay that will be scared now, that will want to put things in multiple places. And if they're smart, right? This is a similar thing for people that are trying to be like, I always hate this word, but like influencers, like who want to do creative stuff for a living, whether that's YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, pick your social media platform, right? Regardless of which platform you're trying to do it on, realistically, it behooves you to be on multiple platforms, because some shift in the winds could happen, and all of a sudden, if you were making money, an entire revenue stream, or the only revenue stream you have, could be completely hampered or wiped out entirely. An example of this would be, recently, Alex from Fishery put up a post, I think it was a short, talking about how he had been doing some small informational shorts about how he's been keeping betas in groups. And someone keeps reporting him, or some ones keep reporting him, and they've gotten to a point where he could potentially get his channel taken away because of these people. And because of whatever it is, but he's never shown betas fighting. He's not showing dead fish. He's not showing any negatives. He's kind of showing the positives and like the routes that he's taking to allow multiple species of beta, or even multiple males and multiple females, all to live in a singular tank together in a level of harmony. So that sucks, because again, in theory, one jerk can like completely screw over an entire channel. It's really horrible. And the defenses are almost none. Because of, say, YouTube, Twitch is kind of similar for those who do a lot of game streaming. But yeah. But I would be curious to watch if Morph Market follows through, because I feel like if they are able to invest $50,000 into their system, I think it will pay itself off. The biggest problem is figuring out the shipping, right? Shipping with fish is a lot different than, like, say, shipping with reptiles. Well, reptiles you still want to ship pretty fast. Reptiles aren't in water and have oxygen limitations that way. It's a lot easier to keep a reptile oxygenated and temperature safe. But yeah, my thoughts. Fish capades. I know you're a Rainbow Fish fan, but I would love to know what your favorite is. Like if you had to choose one and why. So this, here's the thing. Bozeman are what got me into rainbow fish, right? The classic, like, half and half fish, blue up front, orange in the back. That is what got me into rainbow fish. But the more that I have kept rainbows, and I regularly call this particular fish my crown jewel, and that is the running river rainbow. There is a certain behavior in the running river rainbow that is unique, at least in the different species of rainbows I've kept so far, which is that they're extremely tight schoolers. They stay in this like super tight unit at all times. And I've seen this in multiple different tanks of running river rainbows. I've even seen this in their wild behavior in some of the documentation footage that's out there. And that part of that fish is just really interesting to me because of how tightly they stay together. So if I was one of the people who got restricted to where I could only keep a singular tank, one, I would probably want to keep a very large tank so I could have a very big group, but I would keep the running river rainbow. That would be the one rainbow I would keep. I'd be very sad because I like having a lot of different types of rainbows and being able to appreciate the differences. I've found over time, the more that I've spent time keeping rainbows and doing that kind of stuff, I've found that like I get more into like the weird rainbows, and by that I mean the more unique patterns. It's not about the most colorful and prettiest rainbows. So like an example there would be the Chilatherina aleni wapoga, right? Despite the fact that I think that's a beautiful fish and I want to have more of them in the near future, I would rather have something like Melanitania frederici or Glossolepis maculosus because they have kind of unique color patterns. And they have little more nuanced things about them that I find very interesting. And that's like similar with the running river rainbow. They're not the most colorful rainbow, but when a male is like really happy and doing their thing, they have quite a lot of beautiful color, mostly reds and golds with some black striping. But their behavior is what makes them interesting to me. And that's where I think they still remain as like my crown jewel, because one, they have this really cool story. They were nearly extinct, right? We've gone over that a few times. But also in having kept them for years now, their behavior is what really makes me always happy to sit and watch them. So running river rainbow, that's the one. It's my crown jewel for a reason. I love that fish. It might not be the coolest of all the rainbows out there. I'm sure lots of people would say like the Kalitawa or the Myrisai in most recent rainbows, or might go a little more classic with something like, say, a Bozeman, but running river is my jam, man. I just love them. Woo! Leo, why are the wild type bettas not as popular? Got a pair of Antuta, and they are very personable. I think part of it is you don't get as much color in them. Most of the wild type bettas you don't have as many like fin varieties. That's one thing that has become very popular, is all the different varieties of fins, and you don't have as much color. You might have one really good color. An example is the Mahachiensis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. These are ones that Alyssa, who was in chat, keeps, and I love them. And they can stay in a colony together. And they're actually pretty peaceful, and they tend to like slightly harder water. They don't necessarily need the super soft water that a lot of other bettas do to have the most success with them. Or you can look at even something like the strawberry betta, or betta rubra, all the way up to like the macrostoma, right? They're pretty simple. They're mostly a red fish with a little bit of black. That's nowhere near as colorful as all the crazy like the Nemos and the Galaxy and the this or the that, or like what's become really popular lately is the alien bettas, which are kind of a hybrid species. But I think a lot of people just haven't been familiarized with wild type bettas and gotten used to the fact that like they have way different behavior. Some of them can live in little colonies. Other of them like are mouth brooders. They don't even build a bubble nest, right? Some can live with multiple males to one female, or can only, or can be in big colonies. It's not like what we typically see with most of the Betta splendens varieties, where You only really want one male in a tank unless you have a very large tank and you really know what the heck you're doing. And even then, still risky, right? I think that's a lot of it. And plus, I think one thing that has made Splendens super popular, other than the color, is the fin varieties. You just between the half moons and the placots and the veil tails and the this and the that and then that. You have so many different options beyond just color to give you something interesting about that fish. And they've just been in the hobby for so long. Even though most of the wild bettas are significantly more durable, I get kind of frustrated. I think that's probably the right word. In that, like, as an example, brother-in-law James has tried bettas a couple of times in his tank. And unfortunately, just the genetics on the modern, like, fancy beta, and that's what I'm going to start calling them instead of fancy guppies, is fancy betas. Their lifespans are so much shorter now. They're so much weaker. They're not as durable and as tough as they used to be. I remember you would get a betta from your fish store and they would live, 5-ish years. And you basically kept them in like a bowl with nothing. You weren't like really taking the time or going to the level that most of us fish keepers do nowadays for our tanks. And they could just be fine. And now it feels like, oh, you weren't absolutely perfect? Yeah, it's going to die in 6 months or less. And it's just, I don't know. It kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's why I kind of, if I was going to do bettas again, in the sense of probably brother-in-law James, he wants to do bettas, I would more likely steer him toward a wild type betta because I feel like they're a little more interesting, but they're not as much color, and more of our new fish keepers tend to gravitate toward bettas, and lots of color is what usually hooks people in. So I think that's why. CJ, or the CEO's kid, has a fish habit. It would be really funny if you found out that like someone high up on the executive panel was like, "What do you mean we're not selling fish anymore? My kids love fish and I buy fish all the time off our website. Quit it." That would be hilarious. But I'm sure that's probably not the actual case. Robert, have you ever used an HMA filter doing water changes? Do you know if the tap comes out? So I'm assuming you're talking about like the one of the home filters. Well, I'm not. HMA is like, for some reason my brain's is not processing. Whoop. Oh, heavy metal reduction. Right. No, because for me, there's like nothing in my water. I don't need any of those. If you were in an area, say you had a type of well water or you had some other municipal water that had heavy metal levels in them, it would be advisable to use something similar, and the water will probably come out a bit slower, so you just adjust for that. Because it's gotta run through whatever media it's using. It's probably something similar to how in reverse osmosis, if you have a membrane, so you only get so much water coming through so fast. I'm sure it's faster in a metal removing because you probably don't need as much stuff being stripped out as you do for like the RODI membranes. But yeah, fish capades. If I do bettas again, it's Splendens. It will not be Splendens wild type. I mean, I think wild types are really cool. I'm really worried that I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. I'm guessing this is supposed to be Get Things Mark, and you've kind of like shrunk stuff in it, or it's Gethings Mark, one of the two. But hello from Ireland, first time catching me live. Hello. Um, I won't I won't try a bad Irish accent. I know that it would be horrible and will sound more like horrible Scottish accent, so I won't do that. I will just say hello and thank you. What part of Ireland are you from? I'm curious. Is it we in major cities? Cut out a little more rural? You, I'm curious about that part. All right, more questions. Let's start speeding this bad boy up because I know I'm way behind. From Leo again. I wonder if UPS or FedEx can open its own division for live animals. Imagine the revenue they can from just that, and less delayed packaging. Well, I think they kind of effectively already have that built in. I don't think that from a logistics perspective, and I don't work in this industry, so I'm just going off of some things that I've learned from friends that do work in that industry. It behooves them to keep things the way they are and use basically just labeling and kind of force all of us to ship at express levels rather than trying to create a dedicated division, because then you need to have staff that are well trained on very specific things. And if you had entirely different locations, that would make it way harder. And embedding them into a current location and adding excess levels of training, again, is very, very difficult because there is a reasonable amount of turnover in that industry. So it's tough to keep everybody where you want to be. Johnny Dan's Fish, no one used Get Gills. I mean, for a while there was, right? I felt like for a while there was a reasonable amount, but I think it's because it got talked about more until Dan fully fleshed out the new website, and then it kind of went by the wayside. I know people who were using Get Gills a lot, and then eventually they stopped using it as much and just used Aquabid because they weren't getting probably enough traffic. But you're probably right. You're probably right, Johnny. What do I know? I'm just a humble dum-dum on the internet. Oh, Riley, are Running Rivers a tighter schooler than Praycox? Yes. I've had Praycox. I've had Praycox in a reasonable group. While they school a lot tighter than most of the other rainbows, Running Rivers are more like, my example to you would be Rummy Nose Tetras. Very tight schoolers. I don't ever really see mine unless they split into two small groups and go hide during water changes. That's about the only time that I don't see them, all of them clustered together at all times. Even when they eat, they're in a very tight cluster. That's one of the things that makes them really, really interesting to me. But Praycox is probably like the second tightest schooler, at least that I've experienced when it comes to rainbow fish. They're a good fish. They're a good fish. Hoon Aquatics. The colors on maculosus is underrated. Pictures don't show their true colors at all. Yes, they definitely have that like oil slick kind of iridescence to them when you get to see them in person. There's a lot of subtle things that and the other fish that I would give a similar appreciation toward are Bowmanai. So Ron Bowman's fish. They look kind of like blah Bozemanai, but realistically, they have this wonderful metallic-y yellow that is impossible to catch on camera, but in person looks amazing. And then those red pinstripes just really make them pop. Plus, the males and females both have really good color. So unlike a Bozemanai, you get similar color out of both male and female in the Bowmanai. And yeah. I just think there's a lot of lesser appreciated rainbows that I tend to gravitate toward because they have weirder patterns or there's something very subtle about them that is very much an in-person thing to appreciate. And that's totally, I think, like the old man yells at cloud level rainbow keeper that I've become, where it's like, yeah, the big colorful ones are super popular, and yeah, they look great in photos, but have you seen this one up close, and if you sat staring at it for 4 hours straight, then you get to really appreciate it. You know, it sounds like the most old man, like, crotchety person who's telling people to get off their lawn from their porch kind of thing when it comes to rainbows, but it's what makes me kind of appreciate them more and more. You talking about Running Rivers are tight? Yeah, I mean they're great. They're so cool. If you can get them, they're a wonderful fish. There's a few people that are selling them. I know like Marcel, so Roseline 17 on Aquabid, had been breeding them for quite a while, and I think he still is and selling them. They're a really cool fish to have. And I know Dan has gotten them in, I think, through Marcel a few times on his website. I don't know if he's planning on bringing them in again planning on bringing them in again anytime soon. I can English, but I just love that fish. I really do. I really do. It's such a good fish. It's crazy that most wild bettas you can keep in groups. Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about like the Mahachiensis and similar. I keep going to that one just because that's the one that I know the best because I have a friend that keeps them. You can have big clusters of them in a tank together. Get like a 55 or a 75, and you can have a reasonable size group, and they live peacefully and won't predate their fry too much. it's just really cool because you can see them all go together. You lost your Mahachiensis colony? No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Alyssa. We can get him back. We can get him back. That's actually probably one of the few betas I would want to have. It would be really rad to see like somebody do like 180 or 240 big, just super big tank of like a more peaceful colony type beta, like a wild type beta. That could be really cool. Some person needs to do that. I'm too much of a rainbow fish psycho. If I get a big tank like that, it's going to be like, how many rainbows can I fit in this? The answer is a lot. Although, if I got a really big tank, I'd be really tempted to do Van Ur and I, because they're the big boys. And when you get them big and colorful, man, do they look crazy. Hoon Aquatics. Beta species Api Api are super colorful right out of the import boxes. Those are the ones that Moonlight has. I swear I've seen that fish before. Maybe it was just in pictures, because I know the name. And yeah. It's just one of those things where like certain fish that you don't see very often, when you see them in person, change your opinion, especially when they're happy and colored up. They completely change your opinion about certain types of fish. I think rainbows are like the cheater way to do that, because you see a rainbow in person and you're just like, they are so colorful and social and kind of dopey, but I love it. Because some people will see pictures of them and be like, I don't know, man, their body looks really weird. And they do. They look a bit dopey, but they're great fish. Submerged Design Studios. My Betta Mahachiensis quickly became some of my favorite fish. I'm amazed watching them breed. They are so beautiful. Preach. Send me a video. Yeah? I'd love to see what you have. Which is, I'll put my email in chat if you want to shoot me a video. Unless you have something on your channel, then just send me a link. But if for some reason I miss your questions, please feel free to email me, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I put it in chat. Replay crew, you probably are familiar with this one by now. But yeah, I do my best to answer emails. Sometimes I'm a little slow, but I'm doing my best to play some catch up over the next few weekends on top of doing my taxes. I gotta do my taxes. I hate taxes because I'm not that great at them. That's really what it comes down to. I do good enough to not have to owe the government money, but I'm not good enough to like fully optimize everything I could possibly do to get that extra like 10 schmeckles back. You know, it's like this. Let's be honest. I'm not getting a lot of the out of the gov. Mickey, I'm late tonight. What's your opinion on the M. trifasciata Goiter River and M. nigrans George Creek? I need to remind myself if there's any color differentiation in the George Creek, because the nigrans is like a classic rainbow. Are you trying to send? No, that's not correct. Google, what are you doing to me? This is like, I'm looking at a photo from GERD, and it's like not the best ones I've ever seen. There's a better photo. That's more subtle than some of the other nigrans. But you've got a bit of yellow in them where like my kind of atypical when I think of the nigrans in my head, right, is the like more pastel-y blue version. I can't remember which catch location that is. One moment. I might be able to find out. Oh, the George Creek has a lot of red in the fins too. Finally found some. Let me share my screen so that you don't just hear me babbling like an idiot and you can see what I'm talking about. Lordy. Let me make sure this is set up correct. No, that's not the right one. I could have swore I had a thing. Do I not have? I guess it is this one. Hold on. There you go. We'll freak everybody out with my. Put it over my face. This way you can't see my tabs. Because people like to complain about my 8 bajillion tabs. This is the George Creek right here that's on screen. Um, so a lot more red. The one that I'm used to, let me see if they've got a picture here. Of course they don't on this one. There are some images in the gallery though. Maybe. No. Is this all just the George Creek? Yeah, these are all George Creeks. Okay. What I'm used to, does this actually show? You do see my mouse, correct? I hope so. The one that I'm most used to is like this picture here, where it's a lot more kind of a steely blue and black. This is kind of like the classic quotation marks Negrons to me, which I tend to like because it's you don't have a lot of fish with that coloration. Although I have to say that that George Creek is really pretty. So let's get back to the actual question. Not very blue in person. The side flash just happens to be kind of changing stuff with the pictures. All right, well, I've never kept them, so what do you want from me? Goiter River versus the Negrons. I think what you would find is the Goiter River is more common. And if you really want a lot more red, you would want to actually look for the Blythe River. Um, it's very similar. They look very, very similar to Goiter River. There's just a bit more red intensity, and the bands are a bit thicker when they get to full coloration. But I think if you wanted something that's a little more interesting and cool and has a little extra color, I would go toward the George Creek. So if I were choosing between Goiter River and George Creek, I would probably choose George Creek because I like a little more interesting. Goiter River at this point is really well-known fish, really pretty fish. They get a lot bigger. They get some size on them. So if you want a bigger fish, that might be the other thing to think about. If you want something that's going to get that like big kind of 4.5, 5-inch body size on a male, that's Goiter River all day long. They get big. They look amazing. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Blythe River, though, you want those red stripes, it's Blythe River. It's that fish is lights out. Yeah, Negrons isn't like the super colorful. Let's be honest, but I honestly think they're really cool. They just there's a lot of the like not as colorful rainbows that are out there, and we should put this in quotation marks because they have their own color, and a lot of it is more visible in person than say on a camera. But there's a lot of like subtleties that you get to see in the rainbows that aren't as colorful, and I put this in quotation marks because often the big in your face colors usually mean there's not a lot of like interesting subtle stuff that happens with that fish. But you already have lots of color, so can't really go wrong. It's just what kind of right do you want to be? So from our Irish friend, all automated here pay VAT, which is value added tax, on purchases and taxes paid before you receive it. Apply a refund if you believe you are owed one. Easy, but always something in hand in your pocket. What? I feel like I missed some context. Hold on. Hold on. 7 Cent Studio, Rainbow Fish's children book shaped my life. Hey, this is a very popular. You'd be amazed how often I try to search for things with like rainbow fish as a very flat word to show people something early on when I was keeping rainbow fish, and it would bring up that, and I would be like, okay, I just got to pick a species and go that way because that will find me pictures. Because like in the field I work in, right, there aren't very many fish keepers, even though tech is very, very diverse and tends to have a lot of people from Asian cultures where it's far more popular to keep fish. Surprisingly, not a lot of fish keepers work in tech. So anytime you're like, oh yeah, they're like, what are your hobbies? Oh well, I keep fish. Like, oh okay. Like saltwater? I'm like, no, I keep a rainbow fish, which is a freshwater species from Australia and Papua New Guinea. Like, okay, what does that look like? I'm like, all right, well, let me get you some pictures. And early on, I can remember like looking up just generically rainbow fish, and it would bring up the art from the book. You're like, that's not what I'm looking for. I mean, kind of is, but not what I'm looking for. Paul Solterra autocorrect about the Ivanacara bimaculata. Well, that's a fish our good friend Huniquatics has. Ah, thanks. It's Gethings, one word. My surname. Gotcha. Okay. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing Gethings correctly. I'm sure it's probably also wrong, but I'll claim ignorant American for that Surname for what we call the sunny southeast country in Wexford, living rural-ish. I honestly would like, as I get more cranky and old, um, I kind of want to not have people as close to me. I would love to live on like at least an acre, just a little bit of space. I mean, realistically, you talk about like win some crazy lotto. I'm gonna go like buy 50 to 100 acres in a compound somewhere and move half my family in, and then just be like, no one else, stay away. I'm just gonna have like a. I've joked with my wife about this a lot. Like, I'll have tons of money. I'll build like a little 1,000 square foot apartment to live in, have a couple of pastures for my dogs, and then like a 10,000 square foot fish building. Because, why not? Rodrigo Silva did a video showing the Mahachiensis in their own wild habitat. I'm going to have to look that up now. See, I feel like a horrible streamer because anytime somebody does something about that, in the sense of talks about something that's interesting, I'm like, I must immediately look this up. Found it. Saving that for later, but we will get you all a link. For those that are interested and want to watch it, we'll give Rodrigo some love. It looks great as a video. Bam, there it is. There's the video about Mahachiensis in the wild. Luis, any tips for red phantom tetra behavior? They are so shy. Patience. Give them places to hide, right? So that if they feel they need to hide, they can. But otherwise, just give them time. As they settle in and they learn more and more that, like, you, the human being, are not a predator, especially if they really associate you with the bringer of food, they'll become significantly more comfortable anytime you're in the room, you're watching when the lights are on, etc. And they will slowly, over time, get used to their habitat. I had a similar problem early on with some of a different types of Daino species I kept really, really early in my like return to fish keeping. And the more I found is just the more I was around them, the more chilled out they became. It was good. It's good. See, now I see. Paul Sotero went to Moonlight Aquatics for the first time today. Good price on a trio of Ivanacara maculatus there. I'm guessing those probably actually came from Hoon Aquatics. Just a guess. I might be wrong, but I would think those might have been fish from Hoon Aquatics. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, buddy. But that's just my shot in the dark, knowing like how close a lot of us are to Chang's store. I actually want to talk to Chang because I think he might be the person I use to occasionally sell guppies, just because shipping to Dan is a little rough for me, and I don't want to ship. I can drive, the 45 minutes it takes me to get to Chang's place on a weekend and drop off ye bucket o' fish. Oh, man. Half your family don't like the other half? Well, geek boy. I know half my family would not want to move. Just plain and simple. So, like, an example, one of my cousins on my mom's side of the family, she recently moved out, just outside of Las Vegas. But she works in real estate, and she loves it. She likes the hot weather. She's from the eastern side of the state where the summers are pretty hot anyway, but she likes that more arid desert stuff. She's a bit glitzy and glamoury, so being in the kind of more semi-rural places like Eastern Washington tends to have is not really up her alley. I think she's a little too glamorous for that. I've got other cousins that just like, on my dad's side of the family, as an example, they're very individual, very quiet, stick to themselves. They would not want to move in with the psychotic loud side of my family. But like cousin Henry is an example where we did the Petco horror stories. Yeah, him and I, thick as thieves. Thick as thieves. We actually talked on the phone right before my wife's surgery. I know this has nothing to do with fish, and yet does. I promise. We're going to get there in a second. And we were talking because like he works in HR basically. But he does a lot of like, he recently got a big promotion. He does like payroll at a very high level for this fairly large medical company. And we were talking. He's like, we need to figure out how to do some own business of our own. And I was like, well, I've had this idea I've tried to do twice, and both times I've kind of got burned trying because I need other people. And he's like, I don't know, you're smart enough, just figure it out. And I'm like, brother, I ain't that smart anymore. I was talking about like the fish app I'd love to build if I could, if I had the time and or resources to truly build it correctly. Also, I'd want to hack a bunch of lights so I could just control almost every app controllable light with one app instead of like 400. You can break into their APIs. It's not that hard. We can break down their code. It shouldn't be that hard. But yeah, we were talking about some random stuff because we're gonna plan to do something relatively soon after my wife's recovery, where we kind of get together a little more regularly because we've all been working too much, plain and simple, and not seeing each other enough. Do a Bentley, please. I'll buy that, Benjamin. I'm trying to find a way to make it happen. It's about kind of getting back to a stable ground to where I could either afford that or have the spare time to teach myself back to a level of code that could do it. I have a friend who's a really good developer, but he just works like 70 hours a week. He just doesn't have the time, and he's got kids, so like whatever hours he's not working, he's with kids. But I've been trying to find a path. The problem is the path is either way too expensive, in to the tune of like, $20,000-$30,000. I make a little money on YouTube, but not that much. But yeah, trying to find something that can get me to that path and get it going. I have a bunch of stuff written down in a document. I made it years ago. I probably need to build a new version of it, to be honest. But yeah, I had plans, things I'd like to do if I could. We'll see. Eventually, I'll find a way. All right. Hunicornix. I imported the Biomaculata. I remember that part. I was the first to breed them in the U.S. I remember that part. Then supplied the genetics to Shoreline Aquatics, who bred the majority of the U.S. hobby. I haven't bred any in about a year. Okay. I need to meet Shoreline Aquatics in person. I really do. I've seen this name enough times. I need to meet said person and I bet I have. And just don't realize that, like, oh, that's that person from the Fish Club. Right? It's probably one of those. Brian, you'd probably be like, hey, dummy, you know who this person is. It's this person. Yeah. Yeah, I know Chen can help. It's just me making time to go out and talk with him. I need to go talk with him anyway because we were planning on doing filming his story and kind of telling his story. Not that several other people haven't so far, but the way I would do it, my version of storytelling. Because, yeah. When are we going? When are you going to dive into the world of Radnocentris? I can read. Short answer, not soon. Long answer, when I can build out proper tank space, aka whenever I can get to a point of where I can build my garage out, or win a lotto and have a giant fish facility. I mean, by all means, I'll take donations. I'm kidding. If Radnocentris end up, however, in Fish Game, I will build the most massive Radnocentris tank just because I can. Because I actually still go back to that every once in a while because it's very soothing for me to just sit and play a digital version of fish keeping. I don't know why, but when I don't have enough time to do proper maintenance on a fish tank, like taking 20 minutes to play that game is just like, this is nice. It's relaxing. Feels good. All right. Do you guys prefer plants in tissue culture or potted or whatever? I tend to prefer potted when possible. Realistically, I prefer getting already fully submerged grown plants from other plant people. But if I'm going to buy them, I prefer planted because usually it takes less work to get them going and happy. Tissue culture inherently, just because of the size, it takes more time, but you get a lot more bang for your buck as far as cost efficiency is concerned. So it kind of just depends. If you're really accustomed to dealing with tissue cultures are phenomenal, and patience is your friend, right? But if you're not as accustomed to dealing with tissue cultures, it can be a little tough to get them to convert and get happy quickly without CO2. And usually higher levels of CO2. So yeah, make your own controllers with Pi Pico W or similar. Yeah, there's that. I mean, the biggest thing, if I was trying to do some level of right, the goal would be to make something that is easily controllable from a phone without having to have extra pieces of hardware. Because one thing that we should keep in mind is that, especially in the fish community, um, there's a higher level of basic tech knowledge, but not that kind of mid to high level tech knowledge that would be necessary to get a different board or controller running for some kind of specific project. Now, granted, if you had something as simple as like a very small board that was just put it in a room and give it power, it will do the rest for you. That's a like outside the box thing, but also that requires a lot of firmware software work. Just speaking as someone who breaks those kind of things for a living, I basically just break devices all day long for my job doing quality assurance work. But yeah, it's not the impossible solution. It's just the more difficult solution. But it has the most ceiling, which is to say it has the higher limit of capability than just a standard phone app by building a custom controller of some form. I fully recognize that. All right. Luke, I'm going to convert everything immerse growth before I send you anything again. Probably wise. I mean, there are some tanks that can handle a lot of stuff, but you tend to do a lot more high-end plants than I do anymore. I used to earlier in my fish keeping career when I was a like complete plant psycho and not more of a like casual plant psycho. I was what I would define myself now as more of a casual plant psycho, but yeah. Yeah. Eventually I'll go back to like full on plant psycho, and that's when you guys will see me break out like some really crazy lighting and like just yeah. Yeah, I have this insane thing in my head that I want to build long term in whatever proper fisherman I am that is basically just for growing plants. And it's effectively like a plant super pond, but not insanely big, right? Something can be like, one of the things I've thought about is either one, a multi-tiered thing, kind of like how you see in a lot of fish stores, but 4 foot by 4 foot. And then you have tiers so that like in the lowest level, you can have things like your buces or anubiuses or things that don't grow super tall. And then in the biggest one, it's deeper so that you can grow big stems and then just have, really good lighting across everything and high levels of CO2, all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Riley, I'll do this as the last question. Although, Luke, if you can shoot me a link to that, I'll do my best to drop in and watch. Kind of busy this weekend, but I know I can find some time, and I'd love to watch your talk. I love crypts. Do they need blue light? Or Bacopa monieri, Sagittaria, Luigia, Repens? Can I just turn off the blue? Yeah, you can just turn off the blue. You don't have to have blue. Keep in mind that white light contains blue light. Right? White light is all light. You don't need specifically a color of light to make them happy. The only times that you would need, and this is quotation marks, a particular color of light is if you're trying to force, say like in boost, the iridescence to come out a little more in a certain color on specific plants. If that makes sense. That's more about goofing with our actual eyes as opposed to what the plants require in their lighting. Leave it up on the channel indefinitely. Cool. I will probably share it on the community tab to give you some love. But send me a link. All right. Gang, it is that time. I will try, like I said, try my best to stream as normal schedule and all that kind of stuff, but there is a potential that depending on how wife is doing, we might not have anything, or depending on how I'm doing, because when I go back to working on site, I get 1 week working from home just this week to help my wife. But when I go back to working on site, I'm going to be a little harder in the first part of her recovery. So we might not have streams after this for a little bit. We'll just see how things go. Anyway, gang, thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate all of you. As always, thank you so much for watching. and stay awesome. Plant psycho is a plant psycho. It's very true. It's very true.